Well, howdy, y'all. It's your internet best friend, Danny. This is Market Explainer, America's #1 business news podcast. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, the Pigman.
That didn't taste well coming out of your mouth. Just didn't taste. Go ahead, wash it down with some Red Bull. Great.
Yeah, all right. I have a headache, so I use Red Bull to cure my headaches. Hey, listen, today we're going to tell you about Facebook's new brand name, Meta. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about WeWork went public finally.
Yep.
Someone else is going public. Freaking FaZe Clan, the gaming team.
Yeah, Danny definitely picked that story. Go ahead.
Well, you also sent it to me, but you sent it to me after it was in our show. And a new study talks about the best age to start a business, and guess what? It's not when you're 19.
Imagine that. Go ahead.
Before we jump into these stories, I want to tell you to join our Patreon. Today we are on episode number 47, and starting with 50, you will not be able to see the episodes on this channel. They will be available exclusively for free on Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Market Explainer. I also want you to visit our website, marketexplainer.com. You can find out about all of our sponsors there, of which there are many of which I own.
Yeah, he wishes. But just to build on that, our full-length episode will not be available on this platform.
That's
the
correct.
Clips, however, will be available on this platform. Look, we're not new to this. There's a bunch of other channels that have done this, right? Including some very big channels. Your clips are going to be available on YouTube. The long form will be available on our Patreon page, and we'll just kind of, you know what I mean, go it from there. But we appreciate all of you for listening as often as you do. We appreciate all of you that are out there, and that's the way it'll roll.
Yes, and we have, of course, our audio will still come out the way it comes out.
Yep.
We also have Market Explainer to Go, which was the big man's idea, and I got to give him credit, because most of the time he comes up with an idea, and I just put my phone in the toilet, because that's
right.
But this was a good idea, and it was, to me, it was like, hey, we put out the clips on its own stream of audio. So if you have Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, whatever, or Anchor, which is where it's native to, you can get all the clips there, and it's just like, it's bite-sized information. That channel's actually growing. It's very interesting to me that that's happening. And I liken it to, I don't have Sirius XM, but when I rent a car, I always turn it to the comedy channel. It's always like, oh, here's one bit from a comedian I like.
Yep.
And then 2 bits from a comedian I don't care for. And then 1 bit from a comedian that I like. And that's kind of how this podcast is. You get some information from me, and then the big man talks until you think of jumping off a bridge, and then I come back in and save the day.
Well, you bring the market, I bring the explainer, right? Like, so
fair enough. That's fair enough.
But anyway, go ahead. What are we talking about today? We've already told them, but what's our first one? I forget.
Yeah. This is so good. We actually said this about 1 or 2 episodes ago. We had talked about how at some point in the future, Facebook is going to have to change the name of its holding company.
Yes.
Which Facebook's primary app is Facebook.
Right.
And Facebook's umbrella corporation was called Facebook. And Google did this 6 years ago when they created
Alphabet. Yeah, Alphabet.
Yeah. And, so Facebook ended up the next week announcing, this is imminent. The change is imminent. I added it to our show. And they said, we can't record this till they actually say the name. And they said, we haven't decided on a name. And there was rumors that it was going to be called Metaverse or something along those lines. And I said, I got to wait till this thing comes out, because I want to mock it on my podcast.
Absolutely.
Because what's the point 100%. Of having a podcast? So Facebook has rebranded the name of their holdings company to Meta.
Okay, so, all right. Okay, here's the deal, though. Okay, Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg came out with his announcement.
And hold on. Can I just say something about this? If I have one irritation in my life, it's when billionaires try to act like they're not billionaires. Hey, bud, get a $300 haircut. What is this bull? It's this
right,
Caesar.
Leave the man alone. He can look however he wants. All right. For those of you that saw Al Davis III or whatever, the owner of the Raiders, and how he looked after the owners meeting, you can look however you want to look if you're a billionaire. Okay.
You can look however you want to look, but please stop looking like you cut your own hair, and please stop cutting your own hair.
No, it's one of those vacuum things, I'm sure. You know what I mean? The vacuum haircut.
You are trying to convince the globe that you are not a robot or a lizard person. Please do a better job.
Well, That's he's definitely not a lizard person. He may be a robot. But here's the deal. He came out and said, our new name is Meta. And then in the same argument, the same conversation, he called it, as far as the umbrella company, the Meta Universe, right? Now, I'm assuming, he thought, Meta, and then Meta Universe being all our subsidiaries, which include Facebook and yada, yada, right?
Right.
But then the actual, what was registered with the stock exchange, which is still, the ticker is still FB, right?
Yep.
Facebook, FB. But as far as the stock itself is concerned, it's called Meta Platform Incorporated, which he didn't say Meta Platform. I don't remember the word platform being in his speech, being in any of the work out there, right, that I've read up on it. They're all using Meta or Meta Universe. I don't see anybody actually using Meta Platforms Inc., which is actually what was registered. Does that make sense? Right? And I only say that because... again, when we're talking about how things are splitting hairs and branding and all that kind of stuff, I have no doubt that they're going to use Meta, and I have no doubt they're going to use Metaverse and Meta Universe. Now, the funniest thing, before we get into the meat and potatoes of the story, I actually sent Danny a text after he sent me the link to the article where Zuckerberg had announced what the name was going to be, and a little bit later, I sent him a text back, and I said, there's a reason that Metaverse, Meta Universe sounded so familiar to me. Oh, that's the universe that Real Player One, the sci-fi movie that everybody loved from a couple of years ago, that's the universe that lives in that the world is so god-awful and horrible that we all live in virtual reality, that we can be whoever we want to be, anonymously, be marketed to constantly. The bad guy in that movie, Ready Player One, is the big corporation that just wants to market to you constantly in this virtual world environment that we all live in every day, all day, because the world that we actually live in is gross.
Right. And it's in many ways, it's a reverse matrix.
Correct.
Right? We voluntarily got plugged in. Interesting side note. After this name change, a company called Metamaterials which is a public company, their stock shot up because their ticker symbol, I think, is Meta.
Well, look, all of this, and Zuckerberg said this in his speech, what I just was talking about, Real Player One or whatever, this is actually, as sci-fi and crazy as that sounds, not, obviously, he doesn't want the world to crumble, but in the way that we live our lives virtually and online. We
don't know that.
Well, you're right, we don't. Again, I don't believe in Danny's, we're all going to die soon, but here's the deal.
I don't think that either.
Facebook, as far as Mark Zuckerberg is concerned, believes, as in the 90s when the sci-fi, this actually was created, the metaverse was created in the early 90s in science fiction, is they believe this is the byproduct of the internet. This is the next evolution of the internet, that we will all live virtually at least part of the time through a system like that to maintain anonymity and to do things that we can't do in the real world.
You're not wrong. I obviously that's what he's betting on. There was another article that came out recently, I think it was from The Verge, that said Facebook has a lost generation. It's just unable to capture a certain generation of young people to use both Instagram and Reels as their only product that is now speaking to that generation, the TikTok kids.
I don't even know that Reels does. I mean, my young kids that don't have access to TikTok like to, right? Because it is TikTok-like. So they like to get on Reels because they have access to it, right? Or whatever. I think they sat down and figured out because look, there's all kinds of conspiracy theories out there about why Facebook is changing its name, all the way up to Facebook has gotten too hot for Mark Zuckerberg and he wants to separate the parent company from all of these inquiries from the whistleblowers and all these kind of things.
Which the planted whistleblowers are fake, completely fake.
Well, Danny can think that all he wants. Whether they're real or not, they didn't break any laws. And if they didn't break any laws, that means nothing's going to happen. Right?
Hold on.
Nobody, your grandmother and your Karen mom are not going to stop using Facebook because Mark Zuckerberg wanted money instead of making them happy.
I mean, what are they going to do? Use Truth Social or Getter? Lies.
They're not going to do it, right? So this whistleblower is not telling us we didn't know anything we already know. And quite frankly, whether most people are willing to admit to it or not, what they wanted in the first place, which is their echo chamber, their tunnel, they wanted to be surrounded by like-minded advertising.
Hold on. Listen, when it comes to the Facebook whistleblower, which we didn't talk about because I didn't think it was that interesting. First of all, obviously, I think this is completely a flagrant plant. Like, that is obvious to me.
You think it was a plant by Facebook to have a whistleblower and 2 weeks later rebrand itself so that it would bring automatic attention to the rebranding?
Not just that. Because Zuckerberg wants to talk about this new direction he wants to go. And he's already laid the groundwork with a digital currency and all this other stuff. What I think we're going to see happen in the next 12 to 24 months, the next year to year, 2 years, is Zuckerberg will name a CEO of Facebook. He will remain on whatever
Meta, the board of Meta. Yeah.
He's going to remain the CEO of Meta, and someone is going to be running Facebook, and he's going to go work on building out this virtual universe, which, hey, if you're listening to this, you're watching this, you have kids, they play Roblox, they play Minecraft.
Mm-hmm.
You're older, you're into, whatever video game you're into. That's a universe. If there are people who only have friends, I, for the longest time, had libertarian internet friends that I had never met in person, that we just knew each other from Facebook, and we had real relationships from Facebook. And that's,
look, this has been going on for 20 something years. We used to have LAN parties, right? Where you would meet people in chat rooms, talk to them about Dungeons and Dragons or World of Warcraft or whatever it may be. And then you meet up for LAN parties before the internet could handle all of this stuff. LAN parties for people like Danny, it's essentially where you took your computer physically to a location like an auditorium or someone's garage and physically linked two computers together so that you could play together. Right? This is before the internet. So look, this has existed forever. People, go ahead.
Let me tell you something. Huh? Sometimes you just say something and it reminds me how much of a flippin' nerd you are. And that was one of those
party
things.
Is it? LAN party was definitely. Hey, people out there know what I'm talking about. Look, you say 12 to 24 months. I think that might be a great idea for when he, gives the reins of Facebook over, right? So he no longer gets called to Congress to talk about whatever they want to talk about. Because really, in this press conference, he already said, we already created what's called Facebook Reality Labs. It's already its own entity under the now Meta umbrella. And he set the expectation that over the fourth quarter alone, $10 billion he's investing in Facebook Reality.
And I ran into someone in IRL, in real life, that is a Facebook gaming partner and makes $65,000 a year playing vintage video games. Which, last year Microsoft shut down their Twitch competitor. And they migrated a lot of their people over to, I don't know what the formal deal was. But the reason I bring that up is I believe that they did that, or they approached that, or they wanted it to have gamers stream on their platform as an entree into the metaverse. Because video games are the original digital universe that we escape into. But hey, let's not forget Sims.
Oh, and people still play that, right? And people look, Amazon now has for a while, and I'm sure he transitioned over to the Amazon Gaming Group, which is part of Amazon Prime. You have access to a bunch of games that you can play, including in your Prime account. They change up free games every week. You can download them, much like World of Warcraft has one that does like a platform that does that. Epix has one of those that you can download, different games on and stuff like that. It's just a way to get people to use Amazon Prime for yet something else, right? And expand the gaming platform. Look, I don't think that the name change has anything to do with any of these things that people are saying. I think they should have done it a long time ago, but he was waiting until they had some meat and potatoes. Yep. I think the next 6 to 12 months, you're going to see products roll out that he's been waiting years on, right? For technology to catch up, for products to catch up, for things to lower in cost and yada yada, for him to come out and announce this, because then on the heels, you can start rolling these things out. And when you roll out products, especially over the course of 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, it creates motion. Right? It looks like you're working this new angle, and it's an angle he's been working forever, right?
Correct. And I listen, I think he is a big, massive nerd, and he thinks that the world is so scary outside. There are currently people afraid of air, that they're going to want to crawl into the internet and live there. And here's the thing. I don't think he's wrong.
No, I think that's been true for decades now.
I personally do not want to crawl into the internet and live there, but there's that Bill Burr thing where he's on Conan O'Brien, and he says, why would you send your DNA to the internet? And it's so true. Like, why would you crawl into the internet and go live there? Casey Neistat, the famous YouTuber, had a great tweet about this. He's like, can we just have an opposite thing where it's like the literal verse or the meat verse, where people are like giving high fives and having sex or something like that? Literally, that's what he tweeted. And listen, I think this is generational, because I think Gen Z, because I grew up without internet. Right.
You grew up on the tail end of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I grew up with dial-up, and my old man was so cheap that when you could get high-speed internet, but my mother got some deal from her work where it was $8 a month for dial-up.
Right.
We had dial-up well past the point where it made any sense. And we had a single phone line in my parents' house. And it was like one of those things where, are you doing homework? Otherwise, get off the internet.
If you don't know what dial-up is, just to clarify, this is when you actually had to use the phone line, the landline, in your home used to have this to access the internet.
In your home called a phone. So this thing used to be plugged into the wall permanently.
Right. That you couldn't take with you when you were driving or any of that stuff.
Yeah, and all you could ever do with it was make phone calls. So this thing does this thing where you can put it up to your phone, your ear.
And hear other people talk in real time. Yes.
But that's it. You can't see their face.
Right. Yeah. No. So, but yeah, look, I think it's all timing. I think he's got a whole slew of products that they're about to roll out. Oculus obviously is their current brand of this, right? The downside to Oculus is it doesn't currently give you the ability to interact with other people around the World Wide Web. You're playing a computer, right? That kind of stuff. But it's just a step in that direction, right? It's only a step before you go from playing boxing in an Oculus against a computer to playing boxing against a person in Germany or a person in Australia or whatever. They just haven't figured out how to get that much information back and forth yet.
Here's the crazy thing. You can go to this place right now. It's called a boxing gym. And in the Meatverse, not the metaverse, in the Meatverse, which Meatverse is now the name of my holdings corporation.
That's your holdings corporation. Got it.
Yeah, it's Meatverse. You can go in the Meatverse and fight a guy.
Yeah, you could go and meet, but you could also get, leveled by that guy. Like one of my kids found out this past week in football. You can get leveled by that guy that weighs 50 pounds more than you. You know what I mean? And that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, I think it's all timing. I don't think it has anything to do with any of the conspiracy theories out there. As fun as they are, Again, I don't think that they're a plant like Danny likes to say, but I do think that nothing that has been at least nationally portrayed is illegal on Facebook. And if it's not
Correct.
illegal, that means nothing's going to happen. About it. The fact that Facebook is a corporation that is in it to make money is not news to anyone.
No.
The fact that they are willing to sell anybody willing to pay them an advertisement and direct it toward people that may think the way that ad wants to think or that product's buyer. Again, none of this is new information.
Yeah, I don't know why anybody's surprised by anything. The whistleblower, just to kind of wrap up this story, that whole thing was stupid to me. Right? Because ultimately, the long-term ramification is Zuckerberg desires to maintain his seat of authority as the company when it comes to social media, and nothing would help him do that more than the government where he's headquartered regulating competitors.
Yeah, I think that is already slipped. He had his 4 or 5 years of that. I think it's already slipped with with Google and with Amazon and with, you know what I mean? Elon Musk hasn't gotten into this area yet, but he might as well have, with as much as his cars and his products are linked, you know what I mean, to certain other products and stuff like that. So I think he's lost that ability, but he definitely wants to be a competitor as they move forward in that industry.
You think so?
Well, I think, look, as far as I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I do believe in the Wall-E thinking, the Wall-E method, right? The Wall-E, the B and G is on everything, right? When Wall-E is going around cleaning up the planet, you notice that B and G is on everything. It's on the Walmart, it's on the drugstore, it's on the cups, it's on everything. Essentially, the entire world became this one corporation that provided everything, right? And I think that, not that I want that to happen, but I think it's a possibility of that happening. When you get these big companies that are just so big, who do you eat up after you've eaten up all the little guys, right?
Well, and here's the thing, is you get slain like Goliath got slain. And how do you do that? A little guy who's really handy with the steel, if you know what I mean, like who's handy with a rock. And the reality of that is, in a market where you can just go out and compete without any barriers to entry, the social media is one where you can just hop in for now.
Well, hop in as far as you independently, but I think, as we talked about last week, when you have stuff like Truth Social that got hacked before it ever was live and whatever, I think people underestimate the fact that what it takes to be successful from a securing yourself standpoint in an online world, right? Any coder out there worth their salt can create a Twitter-like app from scratch.
Of course.
It doesn't mean that it can work and then you can get people on board. I think apps on for like Netflix competitor apps and stuff, it's why you see them pop up and close. Look, you and I, we can have a market explainer app on Roku tomorrow, right?
Right.
It's just setting it up. There's 100 people that would charge us and they'd have it done like that, and we would have it up. Doesn't mean anybody would download it, right?
Right.
That, I think that's the more difficult part of the process than, people think.
I see bifurcation coming very quickly because I have a personal YouTube, personal Instagram. I have Instagrams for all of my different hobbies, interests, and businesses. Mm-hmm. And there's so far, I have one Instagram for just watches. It's Alamo_watch. And I'm just saying that's where I think the long term is coming for traditional social media. But hey, I'm a guy who uses alternative social media apps like Minds, MINDS. The app is amazing. For one reason or another, just isn't catching on. And you have all of these competitors coming from a certain group of socio-political group of people. And they're like, why isn't there a better app? But there's like 5 better apps that they don't want to use because those apps aren't catered to their very specific thing.
Right. They don't want, we talked about it last week, they don't want an alternative. They truly don't.
Yeah.
They want to keep
Right.
what they have. And I think ultimately Facebook is going to give that to them, because I think eventually you're going to see, you have, much like Apple, where there are people that still have their original Apple ID for when they had a, what do you call it, an Apple iPod.
Yeah.
Right, from years ago, because they linked their Apple ID and they've just kept it forever, because Apple makes it very difficult for you to get a new one, right? So,
Right.
and that being the case, I think you're going to see this, one of the benefits of going with this upper umbrella, Meta, is you're
Right.
going to get a Meta tag or a Meta whatever, and that's going
And
to
it's
work
just your
across all
handle.
of their platforms, and they want you to
Right.
do that, because it, like you, people that have 10 different profiles and usernames or whatever, they don't want that. They want you to have one that's all tracked under the same thing, right? Facebook
which
already
is,
does this in pages that you can create and so on,
Right.
And the more pages you have, the more groups you're a part of, the more whatever, it just consolidates that in, and creating an umbrella corporation just makes that easier, because they don't have to combine Instagram and Facebook. They don't have to combine them. It just all runs up
Right.
the ladder.
Right. And the other thing, I'll say is, they've been working on consolidating WhatsApp and Messenger and all this other stuff, and Instagram chat. I think maybe that's a bad idea, because I think they can all exist across different.
I think this makes that easier to not want to do that. As far as the Facebook
Right.
company, I think that was the original idea. Hey, let's buy up these smaller things. We'll combine them into one, and we'll have everybody use one platform. And I think this makes that easier. Why? I mean, except
Right.
for a support, which you can cross-train support, right? You can have one guy answer the phone, whether it's Facebook or whether it's whatever. You know what I mean? So, other than supporting the product, why not leave it as is? And if you feel comfortable using this one versus that one, and if they own 5 messaging and they're making money from all 5, who cares?
Yeah, that makes more sense, actually.
Yep.
Well, hey, I want to move on to this next story, but before I do that, I want to tell you about our sponsor for this segment, Acre Gold. Meet the new store of value. It's the same as the original store of value. It is God's money. It's gold, people. Acre Gold sets you up so, as a seasoned investor or the first-time gold buyer, you can buy 2.5 grams of gold at a steady pace. $50, you can pick your tier. $50 every month, something like that. You subscribe, and when the time comes and you've accrued enough in your account, they'll actually send you 2.5 grams of gold. It's a perfect size for the first-time gold buyer or the seasoned investor. You can hit the link down in the description down below, and you can go to Acre Gold and get started today.
Very nice.
Very nice.
What is our next story? I forgot.
Our next story is, wouldn't you believe it? Can you, what the frick?
This story made me so angry. It made me so angry when Danny sent it to me, and I was like, there's no way this is true.
Okay.
And it made me so frustrated.
You know that scene in Office Space where they kill that printer?
Yes.
That's how this made me feel.
Well,
right?
And that's my point. Okay, so go ahead. Tell them what we're talking about.
WeWork has gone public via a SPAC, making Adam Newman, the former CEO of this company, which all it does is it takes long-term liabilities, and they take those long-term liabilities and they swallow them, and they shoot out short-term returns by buying up Office Space. This was a huge scandal in 2019 and 2020. If you go all the way back, I think we discussed this with our first guest, Matt Cox. This was a hilarious, effectively a hilarious scandal.
No, it wasn't a scandal. It was a scam. It was a scam. They were trying to go public in 2000. Yes, this is the same WeWork, folks. This is not a different company that rebranded itself as WeWork that took it over. No. This is the same company minus the guy that got kicked out, right? Newman, right?
But he still owns a big piece of it.
Of course.
He owns
We'll get to that in a
enough
second. Hold on.
Okay.
Give me a second, because we'll get to that pisses me off in a second. But this is the same company that tried to go public 2 years ago with a $47 billion evaluation in the same year that it lost $2 billion.
So what's $2 billion to a guy like Masayoshi Son, the main investor backing this company?
Okay, so let me paint this picture for you.
But by the way, they in 2019 they did try to go public. They put, I think it's called the K1 or whatever that sheet is that they come out with and say
they tried to go IPO, right? They
Yes,
tried to
they
go
tried to go
IPO.
IPO.
Okay, they tried
And
to go IPO
they tried to go
at
IPO
an valuation of $47 billion.
And
After
today
they had taken $110 billion from the Asian company you were
SoftBank.
talking about,
Yep.
right?
Yep. SoftBank.
All right. After they had lost $2 billion during
$2
that
billion
year,
between
okay,
friends.
which means they weren't going anywhere.
Right. And so here's the other thing. Here's a very interesting side note as to this story, very pertinent. They went public at a $9 billion value, which is just a eensy beensy, the squeech below what you would expect.
But look, they knew it was going to be, like, all indications, according to what I read, and they did this very quietly because of people like Danny and I talking about this. They didn't want this to go on for a week before they hit the market, right?
Correct.
That's why they went SPAC, right? It was a quiet deal that they made. Changed the stock ticker, bam, Monday, right? And the ticker is now WE, right? It's the stock ticker. So, nobody knew about it until it had already happened, because they didn't want to give people time to trash it and talk about it and yada yada. But what Danny said earlier, that I said, give me a second and we'll get back to it, is this. And look, we're going to have to add an adult content onto this particular video, because this guy's douchebag. This douchebag that led to the original failure going IPO in 2019 by the name of Newman. This douchebag at that point was ran out of his own company. And part of that deal of getting ran out of the company, it cost him they gave him, I'm sorry, I don't even see it on my notes here.
$1.7 billion was what they gave him.
$1.7 billion to get the hell out of a company he was unethically running. Took his voting rights away, but did not take his stock away.
Yeah,
so as Danny said, they've made a guy that they ran out of the company a billionaire by taking the same company SPAC.
And along the way, he started selling off his other shares and stuff like that. Here's where this company went wrong, at least in my view, is this is a traditional real estate business. This is nothing new. And if there's one thing hate,
traditional,
no,
it's a scammy traditional. It's a subletting is what it is. But
so that's where I think their mistake is, right? Because the real asset in this world is holding something of value that is intrinsic, and real estate, or land for that matter, a building, is intrinsic value. So their biggest mistake was they weren't buying that. And part of the scammy thing that Big Man is talking about is that Adam Newman was secretly buying up buildings by using money from friends, and he would do this really unethical thing where he would pay himself this huge bonus, I think, from WeWork. And then he would take that money, he would buy the building, and in turn then lease it back to WeWork. He went and trademarked the word "we" in his own name.
Yes, he did.
And then he licensed it back to his own company. So these are all ways founders
license it back for a $6 million license, not a hey, just give me this over here. I want to keep ownership of it, lease it for $6 million. This is why the guy's a douchebag. This is why, to me, WeWork should have failed and been replaced in true capitalist form, because this guy was doing this the entire time. The only reason you realize he is currently under investigation, because when they went into trying to go IPO in 2019, they're trying to prove that he knew that he was lying to potential shareholders because he was fleecing the company in this way. And the only way he got caught was they were running out of money. After
Right.
the $2 billion loss, they were running on fumes in their bank accounts. They were trying to go IPO before the money ran out.
Right. And the crazy thing is, if you watch, there's a documentary on Hulu about it. And they basically say that like Adam Newman was just kind of a pretty wild guy to begin with, but a little more mild mannered. And Masayoshi Son, who is a huge investor in Alibaba, the Chinese Amazon, if you will,
Right. Yeah.
which
But
listen,
more on the wholesale side than the Amazon
correct.
side. But yes.
But the point is, well, they have verticals across the
Of
gamut
course.
now. But he was such an early investor, and he's a Japanese man investing in a Chinese company. There's cultural things there that make Japanese and Chinese people go, ugh. That's just, they don't like there's culture clash there. But he saw Jack Ma and basically said, you need to be a little crazier. And there's this theory out there in entrepreneurship and business, the world of startups, that it's only the crazy ones that succeed. And, you have to be like Steve Apple, or, you have to be like Steve Jobs. You have to be a dick to people in order to succeed. And I don't think that's true at all.
I think a lot of the perception of that comes from what we see in billionaires or soon to be trillionaires now. I think they became that.
Elon
I don't
Musk
think that they
isn't
were
like
that. I don't think they
No.
were. Well, he's loony. Okay, he tried to name his kid a bunch of letters. All right, so I think
did.
absolute
That kid
power
is a
corrupts
bunch of letters.
absolutely. All right.
Well, okay.
And so I don't think that all of these people, like you see in Amazon case, Jeff Bezos, right? Everybody knows that
Yeah.
a photograph of him sitting at a desk with Amazon written across back when he was selling books
Yeah.
or whatever. That looked like
Yeah.
a normal guy. The HGH'd, you know what I mean, bald-headed
looks like a
Lex
super
Luthor
villain, yeah.
guy, right?
Right.
Villain, does not look like a normal person, right?
No.
You don't get 30 years older and reverse engineer a body like that without something going, right? Crazy.
Yeah, okay, but when I have billions of dollars, I will do the same thing. Okay, but what
Sure.
I'm trying to get at is Masayoshi Son carries that belief, and he basically was supposed to go meet with him, and he was taken, kind of breathtaken, by Adam Newman, and said, "Hey, I think they were asking for $500,000 or something." He said, "Well, what if I just give you 10 million? Can you go crazier? Can you expand faster?" And so let's just presume, I don't know, that Mr. Newman has kind of sociopathic tendencies that were just latent, that were underneath the surface.
Sure.
And he was working every day to beat those back. And then one day somebody goes fishing and says, can you bring these to the surface for a lot of money?
And he admits that in this article. He does.
Yeah.
He says, I was taken advantage of. And this guy, SoftBank, owns 80% of this company. Nobody's made their money back on this company. If you're thinking about investing in WeWork, know that there have been at least $110 billion, but it's probably closer to $200 billion invested to keep this company afloat, right?
Yeah.
And it just went SPAC at an evaluation of $9 billion,
Right.
which I'm not a mathematician, but I'm pretty sure that's still $190 billion short. Okay?
Sort of where they started.
And
yeah.
I don't know about your investments, but my return on an investment, I don't know the math on that, but it's a long time before, right?
Yeah, I think maybe in your great grandchildren's lifetime, you might be able to get some of the money back. That's just to break even. But what I'm trying to get at here is the big mistake they made was Adam Newman realized at some point that the real value was going to be in owning these buildings, and the fact that they don't own these buildings is the crime.
Well, he figured out that the real value was in not doing what his company was doing, was
that's
using
true.
the company that he was doing, right?
To bilk it for money.
So again, investment, right? This is now a publicly traded company. And when you start talking about investments and how companies make money, again, I don't know, as an investor, as an outside person looking at this as a stock investment, how
Right.
this company still continues to make money in the long run. It can make money in a short run, right? If everybody's looking for office space and everyone's looking for, you could make some short-term money. But in the long run, you own nothing. You are subletting other people's assets.
Yeah. So here's the other thing. I think 2020 taught us that people don't want to work in their office if they have the option not to.
Right.
And the kind of startup culture, I think, there's a guy that we can all watch on YouTube, Doug DeMuro. In the middle of the pandemic, he started a business. And he said, I've thought, because after the, kind of things cooled off and he said,
Sure.
we could get into an office. He's like, well, I thought of getting into an office, but the biggest problem is I started hiring and everybody's working from home.
Mm-hmm.
And I got one guy in Las Vegas. I got one guy in Texas, one guy in Florida, one guy in Connecticut. How do I get everybody in one office? So I think that this kind of the lean startup that used to be the bread and butter of WeWork. And when I've been to 2 or 3 locations that WeWork had in Austin. I don't want to work in it. I never saw the appeal of sitting at this long, like Game of Thrones table where I'm shoulder to shoulder with strangers who are like, I'm working on this life. I'm going to change the world with my app. And my app tells you when to take a poop. No.
Well, those guys are at coffee shops. But look, here's the deal. I think it boils down to we have been fed our entire lives this dream, this American dream of you in a big office, right? Big corner office with a nameplate on the door or whatever. We all want to own our own home, and we all want the white picket fence or whatever. And I think that's where it comes from. I think people feel, especially Generation Xers and a part of millennials feel if you don't have an office, you're not successful. And that takes redefining success, right? Because that prestige, right? Think about all the 80s TV shows and all the 80s movies and early 90s movies or whatever. If you were successful, you wore a suit all the time, you went to your office or you had your own building, you had your own whatever, name on the side. It's the whole thing, right? And I think people still feel like if I'm working from my home in my pajamas, am I successful? And it's more about perception than reality.
And here's the other thing about perception versus reality. People have to start contending with the reality that money's fake, but that's a different conversation.
Well, no, success, look, you can be a stay-at-home mom or dad, work from home in your pajamas, and still make $120,000 a year.
And that to me is more successful than someone who makes 120 grand, gets in their car, drives 25 miles
for an hour.
Yes. And then, I have people in my family and they said, I would spend 3 hours a day to get ready to go to the office, drive to the office, drive back. That's 3 hours of my life I'll never get back. That's that's 5 days a week.
Yep.
And that's too much time. That's 15 hours a week I'm losing. Why? And when I can just wake up in the morning, put together a modest breakfast, sit in front of my laptop, do the job, take a lunch break on my couch, watch television, or do whatever. Or
watch an episode of Netflix, go back to work, right? And
whatever
and
it is you want to do. And I know people who are saying, not only am I never going back to my office, if my company says you have to come back into the office, I'm out.
Absolutely.
I'm not. So part of what we're seeing with Great Resignation, the other things is office space is not going to have the same value that it used to.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, how is Sam Zell doing? Has anyone heard from Sam Zell recently? He's America's largest office space owner. In 2019, when this scandal was going on, he went on Fox Business or CNBC and was saying, I love this business. People are always going to have, and he said this, it was like one of those things where you say, I'm never going to get struck by lightning as you're getting struck by lightning.
Well, nobody could see what 2020 brought, right?
Yeah.
At the time, you can only make assumptions based on what you know, right? Nobody has a crystal ball. Everything can change tomorrow, and obviously 2020 brought out a bunch of change. Now, how that works out, I think office space still has its place. I think, but in a very different form. I don't think you have, I'm going to come rent your 2 floors because I've got 200 employees, right? And all. Right. I don't think that has any value, but there's definitely value in space.
Here's what I think is going to happen. I think a lot of large companies will have an office that is designed to house 30% of their workforce, no more than 30% of their workforce, and they will have a quarterly, or there's flex desks. It's going to be like WeWork. And one of WeWork's verticals was designing spaces for other companies. And I do believe that might have a potential future, because
in the design.
Yes. Big corporate America doesn't understand how to design a flex space, and they can still make money designing those spaces for people. And that might have some value, because these big, I don't think, Adobe, I don't think that Oracle, they're all going to get rid of their office. But I think what's going to happen is, if you live where the company is headquartered, you come in every 3 weeks, every 2 weeks, and you have a certain round of meetings, and that's that. You go home.
Well, I hope they don't even do that. I hope there's a couple of projects here in Austin with all of these buildings being built and cranes everywhere, and you know what I mean? That old joke.
Flipping Apple's space was gnarly.
Well, they've already, in some of these building spaces, converted, because now these are buildings being built, so it's a little easier than a building that's already existing, but they've already converted some of these that was supposed to be commercial space into residential/commercial, where floor 1, 2, and 3 are being built as condos. Building 3 and 4, or level 3 and 4, are going to be office space in some sort by company, and then building 7, 8, and 9 are going to be residential condos, and then so they're branding these, and then obviously key cards, you only have access to certain floors if you only there's security involved. But you can design that in some of these places where maybe you have what was originally this big office building, you turn floor 1 and 2 into condos, or 2 and 3, and then 8 and 9 and whatever.
So to me, there's a lot. Even the Apple building that they're building off of Palmer, in Austin, North Austin, there's a hotel now, right?
Right.
So, and it probably, just for zoning and legality, is easier to call it a hotel and just have a separate building that's a hotel. Right. And even though Apple probably owns the hotel, and it's
good for them. And they learned it from the NFL. Every time they build a new stadium now, is building the stadium out in the middle where there's no one, because they want to own everything around the stadium. They want to own the restaurants around the stadium. They want to own the hotels around the stadiums. They want to own the entire process of you going to see an NFL game. Why shouldn't Apple, Google, all these others that are building out these complexes?
It's not just that. We're going to have staff coming in from other states, other cities, other parts of the world to this location. We can now house them. And then, because once you solve that problem, it's as simple as the logistics is as simple as getting somebody to get on a plane once a quarter to discuss a certain thing. They take a round of meetings for a week at the Austin building, and then they go back to wherever the heck they came from. And they're doing their job in Connecticut or whatever.
You can expand that all the way out. If you're building a campus, why don't you build a couple of condo buildings on it and house certain employees, right? All the time.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
This is a perk of moving your family here. They stay in the condo for the first year, right, until you get your feet, whatever
it is.
And again, that all on property they already own, so the cost of that becomes next to nothing.
Right. And so I think that we're going to see corporate dormitories and these kinds of things. And that's where WeWork is going to be at a disadvantage, because they didn't own the buildings. If they had owned the buildings, once you own the building, there's a little bit of flexibility to, I think anyway.
I'd be surprised if WeWork's not zero in the next decade. I don't see it. I don't see it lasting the next 5 years, much less the next decade.
No, and I think JLL or HFF, I think those companies actually merged, or somebody comes up and buys them because they have these leases, and then somebody is going to turn around and try to own the buildings that these leases are in. I think that's what if I was them. Or
piece it apart like the old school 80s and sell it back to the people that actually do own those buildings. Say, hey,
that's true too.
You have people that are already here. Give us X. We'll sell you the lease, right? And just go back to the way it's always been, which is directly to, the owner. Yeah. Why not? right? That's what I would do if I was coming in and this company in the next couple of years just fails. I would come in, buy up all their leases for next to nothing, and then sell them back to the owners of the property. Be a middleman. You'd walk away with millions and millions, if not billions.
Yeah.
And you know, everybody'd be happy.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go get a double-breasted suit and a really wide silk tie, and we'll do that. And I'll drive a Lotus Esprit. All right. I want to tell you about our next story, but first, BigManGear.com is the sponsor for this story. You can go to BigManGear.com and you can order stuff from Amazon Prime, designed and created by this guy.
That's right.
America's sweetheart, America's teddy bear. And soon, when Texas is a country, I'll have to say Texas's teddy bear. But anyhow,
that's right.
Listen, it's a fun graphic T-shirt brand, printed and delivered to you by our good friend Jeff Bezos at Amazon. So you can go to BigManGear.com. And, hey, Jeff, we'll see you at the next poker game. I'm going to get you this time.
I'm sure he stamps every one of them himself. But yeah, go ahead.
Personally, yes.
Yeah.
This next story, throw me off of a bridge, please. I don't want to live on this planet anymore. FaZe Clan is going public via SPAC at $1 billion value and will be on the NASDAQ.
Okay. All right. Back up. First off, tell people what FaZe Clan is.
No, you tell them. You're the explainer in this market explainer. I don't even know how to.
So a couple of things Danny just said straight out of the article. They say they hope that it's $1 billion value. So everybody in the actual real world is laughing their faces off at this $1 billion valuation. Okay, so there's nothing to substantiate that. We're talking about a SPAC that's supposed to happen in 2022. So we're a little early, right, on this story. FaZe Clan is a gamer team, a gamer group, right? So over the last several years, with the popularity of esports, what we call esports and gaming teams, the popularity of Ninja, for example, in Fortnite and stuff like that.
Like, listen, esports is so dumb. It's just gaming. Why can't we just call it gaming? Because that's what it is.
Because, all right, so gaming is non-professional. Esports is what they call professional to give themselves. And let me tell you something. Esports, from a money generating and money investing, is no joke.
Right. That I agree with.
The top 10, the average value of the top 10 teams in 2020, average, $240 million in value.
That ain't bad.
Okay. So when you're talking about, can you make money playing video games? Yes, you can. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I'm totally on board with, if I had kids and they're like, I want to be a professional video gamer. I'm like, yeah, go do it. Why would you be some chump trying to work at a job in a WeWork when you could go, be in FaZe?
Here's the problem. And FaZe Clan is not the only one trying to do this. There's one called 100 Thieves that has a private company. But there's several of these. All of these gamer teams have figured out, okay, we have this short-term investment coming in basically by advertisers, right? Eyeballs is what creates their revenue, right? I've got
G Fuel and so on.
Just like NASCAR used to be. I have a advertiser that's willing to give me X dollars because they know I have 130 million people watching me play this game, whatever, right? That's how they've generated the money so far. But they understand from a business standpoint is that can't last forever, especially as far as games change and people change and whatever. So they start diversifying into real businesses. Now, what does that look like? Merchandise, right? Gaming, creating your own game, right? Or whatever. But to do that, obviously you're a game player. You're not a game designer necessarily. You're not a brand maker necessarily.
You need capital and you need a team and you need to build out all this garbage.
You need capital essentially for acquisitions. The idea for all of these gamer teams, and 100 Thieves kind of started this, was I'm going to create enough capital whether it's through saving these advertisers money or through an SPAC or getting other people involved, is then I'm going to take that money and acquire a bunch of small companies. I'm going to acquire a marketing company. I'm going to rebrand it. I'm going to acquire a merch company and rebrand it. I'm going to acquire a gaming software type of company and rebrand it or whatever.
Or hey, listen, maybe you go to an app, a gamer app producer, and they make a simple game that kids can play on their phone, but it's the FaZe Clan whatever.
Exactly. So, but you can't do that without capital up front to get inside these doors, right? Yeah, you're esports gamer, right? You're the team captain of FaZe Clan. Who gives a crap in the real world of business? You have 130 million followers on Twitch. Again, you're talking to Joe Bob over here that built a steel company for the last 40 years, right? Why does he give a crap about your 130 million followers? It's a disconnect. And that's what they're finding through trying to raise money in the traditional way, is your traditional angel investor
doesn't understand.
Who's giving them $100 million for an esport, you know what I mean, to invest in your esports team.
Here's what is crazy. I grew up where the NBA, NFL, MLB, these are all NHL, they're all established entities, but they were, I'm a 90s kid. They were kind of just now established, right? They were like, it was like Michael Jordan's Nike deal was like, he only got his deal is relatively small considered modern shoe deals.
Right.
But the reality is, this is a new thing, but it's not that new. Interesting fact, a lot of owners of NBA teams, because I have a friend who's on a professional gaming team, and he said, well, we're actually owned by the same company that owns the NBA team in the town.
Okay.
And I was blown away. And it turns out that's not a one-time thing, because owners of teams are realizing, hey, I already know what it's like to run a team. Right? I already understand the basics of running a team. I already have that infrastructure in place. Now, if I can replicate all of the same things, but in the digital metaverse, without having to worry about stadiums, zoning, league lockouts because of strikes, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I be the first? And it's so much cheaper.
Yeah, coaching is coaching, right? Like coaching is coaching, right? Coaches coach. There's been several people try to make that kind of switch. Leap, right? Again, esports, several times here in Austin, they've kind of felt out a way to open up an actual esports arena, like a big one.
Right.
The esports, as far as a brand, kind of like the NFL is a brand, esports has a local Austin location, but it's not a big location. It's a very tiny location, or whatever. Yes, it's got esports on the name, but it's not what you would find in Vegas. Like Vegas has a stadium that is an esports, an arena, and that kind of stuff. Absolutely. It was the first big one in America, right? That rivaled some of these Asian countries that have these big sports arenas, and it was built specifically for it, right? And it made it very thing. Now, has it made a lot of money? Has it booked a lot of events? Not as much, because again, US market has not shown over and over. These are something where you're talking worldwide. There are countries in Europe that are big into esports and spend a lot of money on these kinds of things. Asia as an entirety is big into esports, right? And that kind of stuff.
South Korea in particular.
Right. So if you are an American esports player of some sort, right, whether it be Fortnite, whether it be Call of Duty, whatever, where just like some baseball players, some players that don't quite make it to the NBA can go make a very good living in the European basketball league, right? You can make a very good living playing Canadian football. Now, you're not going to make NFL money, but you can make a living playing Canadian football, right?
You can make $150,000 a year popping your head against somebody else in Canadian football, and that's better than going to sell cars because you can't play
Right,
football
or
anywhere
bagging
else.
groceries for next. So my point though is you can make money around the world, obviously, and not necessarily. We have a tendency as Americans to be very with blinders on. How can I do it right here in front of me? And if your
Right.
talents are what's valuable in other places, it's kind of what you got to do, right? So when we
Right.
sit here and go, well, FaZe Clan $1 billion, which $1 billion is stupid, but it being worth a quarter of that. $250 million, I could 100% believe that. $300 million, maybe.
Hey, at the end of the day, as Gary Vaynerchuk would say, it's all about eyeballs. And if they
Right.
have the eyeballs, well, I don't care what they're doing, so long as they have the eyeballs. I think that this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Well, that's always the key to anything is does that translate into revenue streams? Like,
Yeah.
again, I keep comparing it to NFL because it's a sport. Like, we know that when the Pittsburgh Steelers comes out with a new jersey, it just looks a little different. They know that they're going to sell millions of them to those diehard Pittsburgh Steelers fans or whatever. If FaZe Clan comes out with its new merch, its new jacket, its new weather, how many of those are actually going to sell? Because your people that are watching for free,
Yeah.
how many of those are going to go out and buy FaZe Clan t-shirts and jackets and shoes and whatever else? How many of them will download FaZe Clan's apps? How many of them will do this or that? Until you show that, you
Yeah.
don't have a long-term business model.
And here's the other thing. I think there's going to be a very, very soon, there will be a crossover between one of the big shoe companies and a gamer. They'll come out with their own sneaker. And because there is a crossover between guys who like to play video games and collect sneakers. I think that's,
And that could definitely be a test market because shoe manufacturers specifically have so much money just coming out of
Yes.
their ears. The markup on shoes between how much they cost to be made and how
Right.
much they sell them for is just so much money. So the shoe industry could afford to go, hey, we're going to sign Ninja to this, and we're going to create a Fortnite shoe or whatever, a Ninja Fortnite
Yes.
shoe, and test that market to see if it's viable from a
Right.
merchandising standpoint. And it either is or it won't be.
right.
And companies like this, if they do go SPAC, we'll see its viability, right? So
What a time to be alive, big man.
yeah, I
Not
like
even-
testing. I like testing things. I like taking some chances when when chances are worth it. This could be one of those things where, as they say in gambling, you sprinkle a little over here. You know what I mean? That means I'm not going all in. I'm not.
Right,
But
right,
you
right.
might sprinkle a little. You might sprinkle a little on this one.
Right. I just think it's, and this is, you were saying like in America, we kind of live with these blinders on. I think this is an important nexus for people in this country to start realizing is we're not the stalwart center of innovation that many people view us as anymore.
No.
Right.
No.
Because, all these other countries, because they didn't have the legacies of certain like infrastructure, like they can just, listen, in India, where my grandmother lives, you can't use the landline phone to call anywhere because you can't hear anything. It sounds like you're at the bottom of a well. But everybody has a cell phone and you can just video chat my 80-something-year-old grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And they
that
just leap right
technology
over.
surpassed the creation of the other one in that
Correct.
country.
Well, it was easier to deploy
Mhm.
because they didn't have lines in the ground. So there wasn't Ma Bell wasn't worried about there's going to be a cell phone competitor. So I need to own cell phones and lock people into contracts so I can protect future revenue for my shareholders. There was just like, no, everyone can just have a phone because we dropped satellites above the country or whatever.
Right.
And it just skipped right over. So in a lot of ways, they have advantages because there wasn't as much regulation, because there wasn't an established telco. Also, the stuff. So, those countries had soccer. Most of the countries we're talking about had one or two major sports. So esports had the opportunity to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's all digital or mostly digital, it's digital first. It had an appeal to an audience who weren't already consumed by other sports. So those infrastructures didn't exist and they weren't competing.
Right.
So in a lot of ways, Americans don't think about this. Is like, we've been around for so long that we've been ahead of the curve for so long. We're now, behind the curve.
I'm not gonna agree with Danny on that, just so that nobody turns us off because Danny says he hates America. But,
I didn't say that.
I am saying that we can learn a lot, and there's a lot of money to be made
what I'm saying.
in a lot of places, and that money coming on home to here in America, because America,
better.
specifically Texas. You know what I mean? And
because I'm a Texan and I don't really whatever. The rest of the country's whatever, but Texas is home. Listen, it's what the roundabout of what I was trying to say is not I hate America. The exact opposite.
Not. I was being facetious, but yes.
I know, but I just want to say the roundabout of what I was trying to get at is, if we want to maintain competitive, if your kid says I want to be a full-time Fortnite player or whatever game that you've never heard of, don't tell him that he needs to go get a job as a steel worker. He should go get a bachelor's degree in accounting, because
he or she may be the next ninja.
That's what I'm trying to get at. And there's this unfortunate, and we'll get into this in the next story, there's this unfortunate idea that I think is incorrect, which is, well, only a small percentage of people make it. Well, there's two reasons. First of all, you can go be that percentage. You can be that small percentage. You can be in that small percentage. And the other problem is, well, the half of people that could succeed in it and make that small percentage a bigger percentage are discouraged by people who are, and listen, you're just doing it because you love your family, you want them to be whatever, and you don't want to see their dreams get crushed. But the reality is, the United States will compete better when Americans start acting like the Americans of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, when they have unlimited, unbridled optimism and hope for the future. And the more you act like that, the more hope there is. There's more reason there is to hope. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, that optimism is 100% true, because I actually despise that saying that, only a small percentage are going to make it. Well, who makes up that percentage?
Right.
You don't know. There is no 5-year-old that you can say you're never going to be a Major League Baseball player. You have no idea how that kid's going to grow up. You have no idea what body shape there's going to grow up, what their mind is going to be like. You have no idea. When a coach looks, because here's what I always think on the opposite side of that, is that coach, that parent, that uncle, that random stranger that is telling you that doesn't know anything. Consider the source, people, when you're talking about, and it kind of leads into our next story, but consider the source, because you don't know. You just don't know until you try, until you give it a shot, and where you're going to get.
And let me just say this much too, closing this out. If you aim for being a professional Fortnite player or whatever, and your kid doesn't succeed at that, the amount of what it took to get to become good at it, the amount of effort, if focus and all this other stuff and effort, if they just focus that into something else,
it applies to everything.
It applies to everything. So they will succeed somewhere. And I'm always reminded of the story of Deepak Chopra's son. Deepak Chopra's a whacknut, but whatever. And his kid only ever cared about comic books. And the mom, Deepak Chopra and his wife are doctors. And he was a poor student, and all he ever cared about was comic books. And Deepak Chopra is this new age, whatever guy. And he says to his wife, don't worry, one day he'll just be a comic book guy or something. And I can do that accent because it's not offensive because I'm Indian. But
sure.
The son, at some point in time, sold his comic book company called Liquid Comics to Virgin, which is Richard Branson, for I think a sum total of $4 billion in cash. I know people who work and make 6 figures a year and retire on $4 million. And this kid, before he was 30, had a $4 million exit because all he ever cared about was comics. And he had a traditional Indian name, Gautam, and changed it to Gotham.
Good change. I like it.
Good change. Very much pronounceable. Gives me concern about him as a person. But the point is, the mom had a very like, what is this kid going to do with his life if he doesn't care? And these are Indian people; they love going to school.
They don't understand.
That's what I'm saying. But the dad understood. He'll do something.
Right.
And the kid turned out. I've never read or heard of any comic that this company has ever put out in my entire life.
But
and
you don't have to.
And I don't have to have heard of it. And no one's have to have heard of it to know. I know people who work hard to retire on some people less than $4 million. The
fact that less than $1 million. Have you read the articles of how the average 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old, 60-year-old have in the bank? It's nothing.
So if all he ever did in his lifetime was worked, made that much money, and then went and worked at Starbucks for the rest of his life, he had that one thing. He sold one business, and all he ever did after that was worked at Starbucks and lived in an apartment. He will have done better than his peers who went to college and got master's degrees and bought homes and did everything that they were supposed to do. And he will have done more simply because his father said, he'll figure something out. And he ended up becoming a multimillionaire by selling. And listen, his business could have been a failure until it exited. That's not the point. The point is, it only takes one company to buy it for $4 million one time for him to be a multimillionaire. That is, it's a story that is so interesting and important because it's not a ton of money in the context when we're on this. I'm a market explainer talking about $200 or $300 billion going into WeWork. We're talking about a $1 billion value on a gaming company.
On a gaming team, no less.
Gaming team
that plays a game that plays games
esports teams
are 5-10 years old, right?
Correct. So what I'm getting at is the world. You cannot conceptualize. If you told somebody 20 years ago that in 20 years we're going to go live in the internet because of Mark Zuckerberg, they're going to say, "Who's Mark Zuckerberg?"
Exactly.
And then you're going to have to explain to that person, well, Mark Zuckerberg is going to be the guy who dictates everything about your life in the future, along with this guy named Jeff Bezos. And they go, the guy who sells books? Yeah. He's going to do a bunch of roids and he's going to take over your life.
If your child is under 18, 20 years old, you have no idea what the job is going to have that's going to take up the majority of their life because it may not even exist yet.
That's what I'm trying to tell people is like, that's what I'm trying to get at is you don't know what's going to exist in the future. Yeah, and that doesn't mean that you should just let your kids sit around. You should make them go play baseball, do whatever.
Learn skills, absolutely.
Yeah. But you shouldn't be. We have an industrial age idea in this country that my grandfather was a coal miner. I'm a coal miner. My son will be a coal miner. That's stupid.
Okay,
right?
There's nothing wrong with being a coal miner if that's what you want to do.
With being a coal miner. We need coal miners.
Danny is just saying that. He's just saying it in a dumb way. I'm just saying, but yes, you are right in the fact that we have, especially your baby boomers, right? And the upper echelon of Generation Xers believe that just because I walk this path, you also have to walk this path to get the things that I've gotten, right?
Okay.
And that's just not necessarily true.
So for the boomers and the Gen Xers who think like that, think about 5 years ago, you could walk into a Barnes & Noble, and there's going to be 150 to 200 books on how to become a successful millionaire in America. And of the 150 books, there's going to be 100 categories. All of them are accurate. Someone either made $1 million and wrote a book about it, or someone wrote a book about how to make $1 million, made $1 million from it. And so we don't have there's the market is so big and it's only expanding. So don't get stuck in that rut of thinking, but hey, we got to move on to this next story.
Danny got on his soapbox and just wouldn't get off of it.
Well, what can you do? Listen, once I climbed that height to get on my soapbox, what am I just going to crawl off of it? That's quick.
No, you might fall off. Hurt yourself.
Before we jump into it, I want to tell you about a sponsor, my company, Powerhouse Drones. Now, if you want to buy a drone as a hobby or you're thinking of starting a drone business and you want to learn, you can go to powerhousedrones.com, learn about the different drone options, what those drones do, and which ones to buy, and they will forward you off to Amazon, and you can pick out your drone today. That's powerhousedrones.com.
I don't know if you're going to like my take on this last story.
Okay. So this last story of 2.7 million startups found the
company
ideal
founders.
age. Found that the ideal age to start a business is much older than you think. If it's between your 40s and 50s. So too bad you're 64, you know?
Too bad I'm 557.
Yeah.
I think this is a really cool story that nobody that Danny wants to care about is going to care about. Because here's the deal.
Hold on.
Here's the reality of this story. I will break this down very simply for folks. The fact is when you're young, you don't know shit.
Correct.
Okay? That's this entire 2.7 million people, right? Company founders that at least had one employee so that they got past the I'm the only one working, right? So they had some form of success. If you've hired an employee, you've probably had some form of success, right? As a company, right? Now, so 2.7 million companies, that's probably a wide range. If I got into the numbers, right, to which nobody cares about, probably a wide range from people with one employee to probably 100 employees,
10.
right, or whatever.
Oh, okay.
And done by MIT, which took a couple of years, I think, to do, right? Actually, it took 7 years to do. So over a course of 7 years.
What is MIT?
You know who MIT is. Everybody knows who MIT is. So MIT, book nerds, big head, big brains, right?
Right.
Big brains spent 7 years interviewing all these people to figure out that when you're young, you don't have the experience to do certain things. It doesn't mean you can't. We're just talking about the law of averages here, right?
Right.
But the problem is when you're young, and we all suffered this, when we're young, when you're 18, when you're 15 to 25, right? When you're 15 to 30, when you're young, you rage against the machine, as we used to say in the 80s. You rage against this complex that is constantly telling you you're too young to know what you're talking about. You're too young to know. Well, guess what? Statistically speaking, these old folks were right. They're always right. They're still right. Now, that doesn't change the fact that, like we said in the previous story, that you can't be the exception. You can be the 18-year-old that develops an app in a new way that becomes a millionaire. You can be a 25-year-old that starts a company that 15 years down the line becomes the next Amazon, right? You can. Right. We're just talking about, statistically speaking, when you're young, you do not have the experience, which is why this article led to when people that start businesses in their 30s, in their 40s, in their 50s, hell, even in your 60s, are much more likely to succeed, statistically speaking, than someone that starts one before they're 30.
Listen, there's always that. If you're on Inspiration Instagram, which is kind of a league of its own.
I can only take so much of that. There's only so much positivity I can take, and then I'm done.
I am a person full of hope and optimism. There's only so much positivity I can stand before I'm like, all right, the world is doomed. But you'll see this meme runs around that, and this is something that is true. That, Colonel Sanders never fried a piece of chicken until he was 65 or 67.
Right.
And the reality is that's so
true. And failed once. His original chicken restaurant failed.
And that guy had a litany of failures before his 60s. Mm-hmm. And his, one of his most brilliant partners in that business was this guy named Dave Thomas, who later left to start Wendy's. But followed
his experience from that to create Wendy's.
So what I'm garnering, or what I'm gleaning from this article, and sort of what we were saying, I was saying in the last segment, was that it really is never a wrong time to try to start a business. If you're a young kid, and here's the reality: if you're younger, it's less likely your business is going to succeed. It's 2.2 times more likely when you're 30s, 40s, and 50s that your business succeeds. But to say that, but the reality is, why not try? So if you're old and you're seeing, like when we're talking about this stuff, 20-year-olds going out and 25-year-olds creating $100 million businesses. And that might discourage you. Don't be discouraged by this, right? The best time to start a business is in your 40s and 50s. And your highest earning years, if you're a salary man, is in your 40s and 50s. That's when you're going to earn the most money. So you might.
Well,
at that
was
point,
classically speaking. I don't know if that's the case going forward, and
I don't know.
That's the part I really out of this story that I think is the biggest thing. I think the future is the future of what we kind of have termed in the 2020 is the future of the side hustle. I think the multiple job market, the job you do for this company you work for 40 hours a week, and the job that you do on the side to add extra money, or that hopefully maybe one day takes over this other job, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe you're just one of those people that for the next 10 years, you use your 40-hour week job to do this, and you invest all the ones you make in the side hustle until you can retire early, whatever it may be. But that people think it's one or the other. And again, it's because of conditioning. We've been told by these older generations that you either have to work or you have to start your own company. And it's just not that, it's not that cut and dry.
It ain't that way,
You do not have to be all in. Stop listening to these stupid life coaches. These stupid, dumb life coaches that don't make any money, but they've got life coach next to their name, that somewhere along the line, they all lied to each other. They got in this big life coach meeting and they told everybody, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go out on the internet and we're going to tell everybody that if they don't give it their all, if they don't 100% buy in, if they don't jump in the deep end, that they're not going to make it. They lied to you. They've lied to you for decades now. The fact is you can see if something works before you go all in.
So I just think that what this article is proving to me is that there is never a bad time to start a business. There's never a bad time. And, I'll go back to something my dad always said was like, one of my cousins was telling him that, he's like, well, I don't know if I can afford another kid, but I want it. And my dad kind of grabbed him and said, my greatest regret is that I didn't have more kids. There's never a good time to have a kid.
Never.
It messes up whatever your routine is. Having another kid is going to ruin it. But the reward, and this is my father, the reward is always so much more worth it. There is never the right time to start a business. There's never a right time to do anything. There's just your life. And at some point in time, the thing just stops ticking and you just end up at the ground. And so why not, if you're 50, 60, this is very Gary Vee of people to say, but why not start it? Like, what do you got to lose?
Gary Vee knows
money?
These numbers. It's why he's been saying it for the last couple of years, especially.
Correct.
Gary Vee knows these numbers. But look, my mother used to have a very similar saying, in that if everybody waited until they could financially be ready to have kids, no one would ever have kids. Right?
Correct.
Your normal everyday person. That was her way of saying it. But look, I also had a mentor of mine that told me, he said, it's always good to start a good business, and it's never good to start a bad business. But how do you know which is which?
Right.
And the fact is you don't.
Correct.
You don't. Until you go down the path, you don't know whether it was a good business idea or a bad business idea until you put it out there. Now, you might be able to weed some of the really bad ones out by a little bit of research first. Okay.
Correct.
And a little bit of test marketing first. Again, like we were just talking about esports. If nobody ever went out there and started recording themselves playing video games and figured out that somebody was willing to watch it, we don't have this entire industry, right? And guess what? People have been telling them for decades since
this is stupid.
This is stupid. You're never going to go anywhere playing Pac-Man. You know how many people will watch someone play old school Pac-Man in today's world? Right. It's insane.
And here's the other angle to this. Going off what you said, I ran into a guy who said he made more than he ever did at his job. I think he said it was 85 grand a year. I don't remember what it was, the exact number, but he plays old school video games on Facebook as Facebook Gaming as a partner.
Right.
And when I heard that, I thought, well, gee, it's like I play N64 games and Sega games. And I'm like, that's old school games? Because those are what I played as a kid. And I was like, that makes me old. But I realized, I was like, so this guy's just sitting in a cafe in the middle of the day. And he said, yeah, I play 6 hours a day. So he's like, I play 3 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon. And it struck me as like, it's not a lot of money. $85,000 a year is not a lot of money.
That's more than the average American makes working their backs.
Other thing. There's a study that says something along the lines of your happiness does not increase over $70,000 a year.
Okay.
Your lifestyle might get nicer, might get more convenient, might have nicer stuff, but your happiness is incrementally increased after $70,000 a year. So here's somebody who's maximized his income happiness, and he's playing video games, so he's very
6
happy
hours
with the
a day.
work he's doing.
30 hours a week.
It's not even 8 hours. He's not even putting in a full work week, and he's making that much money.
Playing video. This goes back to, you just got to start something. Danny and I had this conversation 3 years ago.
Right.
You just got to start something.
And it took 2 years, and then we started this.
Right.
And yeah, so I just thought this article was very interesting because the impression we get from the market is everybody is making billion-dollar deals, right? And they're all 22 years old. And the reality is, the stark reality is 50% of Americans work for small business. Small businesses that are mom and pop shops with 2, 5, up to 100 employees. And that's 50% of America. That's wild.
Well, but look, this all goes back to the we only see, again, we walk through life with blinders on. We only see, you know what I mean, the Paul brothers, right, and their success.
Right.
We only see the Casey Neistats. We only see the Joe Rogans, because they're in our face. We listen to them. We whatever, you know what I mean? So that's what we see, and you don't understand that kind of success at that age is so rare, right? What this article, again, it's talking about statistics, and this is not a bash on young folks. It's not.
No.
What it is it's just telling you that when you can combine innovation with experience, your chances of success go skyrocket through. Right?
Drastically.
So if you're I would tell you this, and this is true year over year, if you really look at who sits on these boards for these companies and stuff like that, you get these young innovators with a whole bunch of these old school folks that have been around a bunch of different businesses, that have helped a bunch of different businesses. The 2 major real estate companies that I've been a part of that have now gone public, both of them follow the exact same path of it had an innovator, a creator of the company that then did not make it to the big board, did not make it public, did not do any of these things until they went out and found the people that helped other companies go public, because their names gave credence to their ideas. Those credence to ideas brought on more people that had helped companies go public, right? And so on and so forth. It's just experience.
Yeah, and the Google boys came up with Google, and then the company was ran by Eric Schmidt in 80s, I think it was like an 80s corporate raider. I don't remember who or what Eric Schmidt was. And he ran it for a very long time. He brought it to super, levels before he turned the company over back to the boys, and then they turned it over to Sundar Pichai.
And he may not have even understood what their product was, because that's the interesting thing. That.
I don't think he had a clue what the heck they were doing, right?
Because he stayed in his lane, right?
Yes. He
his
understood
lane
the corporate
was
side.
To do with what his experience, and this goes back to kind of the Robert Kiyosaki thing. If you're a business manager and you're good at doing this, should you be doing your taxes? You're not a CPA. Why are you trying to be a CPA if you're not good at being a CPA? Right? I really believe in that. You cannot be everything. It's not the way your business will grow.
It's incorrect way
exactly.
Of thinking.
You will not be able to sustain yourself. You have to surround yourself with people that are good at what they're being good at and let them do their jobs. I think we've taken up enough of people's time today, Danny.
Right. Correct.
Okay. So do you have one of your dumb sayings that you want to end the show with?
I don't have any dumb sayings.
I love your dumb sayings.
It is not a dumb saying. I just want to let everybody know, despite what other people say, it is perfectly professional to take meetings at the Costco Cafe.
No, it's
all.
not. Do not listen to Danny. If you have Costco in your backdrop, no. Don't
Okay.
talk to me.
Okay, I take business meetings at Costco Cafe. That's all I'm saying.
Of course you do. All right, folks. We'll see you next time.